Hi everybody, it's Maria, and today I'm going to be talking to you about 4 different books that I've read recently, and they're all really good, so I'm excited about that. 3 of them are from BookTube recommendations, so thank you so much. These are from the What Should I Read Next tag kind of follow-up, but I also wanted to do a quick insert of this other one that I read too, so yes, it's all combined. This first one is I'm Judging You, a Do Better Manual by Luvvie Ajayi. I'm going to see a conference that's put on by Glennon Doyle Mountain, who wrote Love Warrior, and I'm slowly reading through the authors that are going to be speaking at that event. This is written by Luvvie, who is an activist, and she is a firecracker. She's very quick-witted, very funny, but I think she did a great job of cutting into racism, sexism, American elitism, so many different things, but she did it with quick wit and humor. She also is very honest about her own foibles, which I always like in an author. I don't like people who think that they're better. And this is not that book, even though she says I'm judging you in the title. But the Do Better manual definitely stuck out for me. One of the big things that I took away from this was actually seems like a little thing, but it's not. She talks about how being from Africa, a lot of people are scared to pronounce her name. Luvvie is actually short for her actual name. But she goes by Luvvie to make it easier for people who are white, like me, who get nervous about seeing all of these letters together. And I was really convicted. She didn't make me feel horrible by any means, but she did a great job of showing how important it is to try and read those names. She talks about when she was walking across the stage, and even though it was all written out phonetically, people just automatically assume they can't say it, and so they don't try. And I just really was convicted to try a lot harder. So yeah, on just little things. I mean, she has big things to work on too, but I appreciate this book. It's a good one to pick up if you are especially trying to figure out how to respond in a loving way to the chaos that's going on around right now. So I appreciated that book quite a bit. The next book that I read is called The Enchanted. This is by Rene Denfeld, who is a death row investigator. So she has experience in this field of where this is set. This Enchanted book is set in a prison where there is a death row. It's kind of, for me, it reminded me of a mix between The Green Mile, Dead Man Walking, and I Will Find You, which I Will Find You is by Joanna Connors. I reviewed that last year, and I can link that below. But, okay, there was a few different perspectives in this. So there's that. The way it is described, I mean, it's not a very long book. I felt like I was in the dark with these people, and that I was trying to figure out where I fit in, how to proceed with life. There are 4 main people that I'm going to talk about right now. The first one is the narrator, who we never get his name. He wants to be forgotten. He is on death row, and he feels remorse for what he has done and doesn't think that there's any salvation for him. He wants to be forgotten and left behind because he feels that that would be best for people. And he is not someone who speaks. He's not spoken for a very long time since he did whatever he did. And he's observing this other inmate who is also on death row, and this woman who it's her job to try and get people off death row and given life instead. So she's working with this inmate. And there's also a priest who kind of goes around with people and tries to help them through their spiritual journey at the end of this. So he's observing all these people. He's seeing how they respond to one another, what they think of themselves. We're also getting to see inside the people's brains to kind of figure out what they are thinking about themselves. And the woman and the priest have a lot of baggage. Obviously, we all do. But they have some very deep, dark secrets that they've never wanted to share with somebody. And it was one of those books. I love books like this. It was one of those books where you know that somebody's just in the dark and they're reaching out and they're trying to find somebody to say, even though I know the worst about you, I still care. I don't know if anybody, if you guys have ever had that experience with somebody when you knew somebody knew your worst, but they were still reaching for you to give you a hug. That's my husband's gotten to do that for me, and it's been a very powerful experience. And that was this book for me. Was these people who are reaching out, trying to say, "Why am I like this? Why have I done these things? Do I still have hope?" So that was the first thing that I loved about this book. The second thing that I really enjoyed about the book is how they talk about time. In it, the prisoners are talking about time as irrelevant. Time is something we do to mark things, to anticipate things, and these people don't have anything to mark, to celebrate, to anticipate. And so time has just become irrelevant. There are those prisoners that are going to get out that are talked about in here, and you see a little bit of light in their tunnel. You also see some prison corruption, which was a huge kick in the stomach. Reading about these people who don't have an advocate talking out about the things that are happening against them. There was, it's not a light read. So there are some heavier topics. There's some rape in here, just not very specifically talked about. There's not details, but it is mentioned, and you imagine the fear and the anxiety and the feeling of emptiness. I don't know if any of you have experienced abuse or anything like that, but that feeling when you step out of your body and become a shell to let the thing happen, so you're trying to protect yourself. I felt like that empty shell that the character was in the book. The characters were fleshed out. I really recommend this. It made me really feel like trying to figure out how to do more with helping prisons, whether it's book donation or, we're book people. That was another thing they mentioned in here, was the main character is a reader, and he just longed every week he would get a new book. And sometimes it was an old reread that he loved, but those books gave him a little bit of hope. And I think that was a great thing to read about. I keep meaning to look into it, and I don't, and I need to do that. And so I just really, really recommend this book. It's not long, but I really think it's worth your time. So yeah, The Enchanted by Rene Denfeld. All right, the next one I buddy read with Patrice, who is one of my booktube peoples. Thanks. Hi, Patrice. This is The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. And yes, I know everybody else has read this. And this is not the cover that I wanted, but this is the cover that my library had. So you do what you got to do. This book, it also blew me away. If you're unfamiliar, Henrietta Lacks is a woman who lived in the 50s, whose cells, she had some cancer, and Johns Hopkins took out some of her cancer cells when they were doing research to try and figure out, one of the researchers there, I'm hoping I get the science right, was researching to try and figure out if he could make an immortal cell culture line. And so he keeps taking all of these cells from different people there. I was going to say inmates, because it was interesting reading this side by side with this, just because it blended a lot with people who are feeling neglected and forgotten. So I always recommend reading books simultaneously that kind of feed off of each other, as long as you don't get them confused. Anyway, he's working on doing an immortal cell line, and he gets these cancer cells from Henrietta without her knowledge, and uses them and creates this immortal cell line, which we've used for, I guess, decades now. Coming up on, it's not 100 years yet, but for decades and decades, we use those lines. And her family was unaware that this even existed until, I don't remember, maybe the 90s. Yeah, they went a long time without knowing. Her family was not well off. This was a perfect fusion of science history that was not dry, mixed with social justice activism. Rebecca Skloot is the white author who did this book, and she in her book goes around to all of Henrietta's. It's like a treasure hunt. She's trying to track down her family members to talk to them and get her story, because for a long time people didn't even know Henrietta's name. They were calling her Helen Lane because they take the first two letters of the first and last name to label the cells. So HeLa is the HeLa cells. And they thought her name was Helen Lane, and the researcher did not correct that misconception because he didn't necessarily want her family finding out that they had been making all of this money off of HeLa cells. And so you kind of see the injustice of a Black person who has been used by white people to profit for a very long time, regardless of the good things that they're doing with the cells. And her family is very excited once they kind of understand what's going on. They're very scared. For a while they thought, they were using their mother's cells and their grandmother's cells to clone people, because nobody sat down and explained it with them. So that was just an interesting, different perspective of just people going in with the assumption, well, of course this is good research. Why wouldn't they want that to continue? But also they're not getting any monetary benefit from that. And so Rebecca Skloot, the author, did set up a foundation to try and help Henrietta's descendants. And I actually just Googled as I was looking for something else, and I found out when the movie came out this past year, there was actually more controversy between Henrietta's family members saying, the book portrayed them as being dirt poor and uneducated, and there were factual misrepresentations. And so the controversy still continues. And it just kept reminding me of how we can't tell other people's stories for them. We have to let them tell their own stories. I try and do a good job at reading authors who write from their own culture's perspective, because there are too many white people telling Black people's stories. And there are too many. We need to open up so other voices can get in. And that's why I have a hard time sometimes just knowing when to say things, because I don't want to let my privileged voice drown out somebody else who hasn't gotten a chance. But I also think it's important to hear everybody's voices. So it just brought up a lot of mixed feelings. For me, some things that really stuck out was her toenails. Obviously, after she passed away, the researcher assistant was doing the autopsy and noticed her toenails and thought for the first time about this person who lived a real life and had stories and had bent down and painted her nails. I like to paint my nails. I like to paint my daughter's nails. And I just thought about that, just that little act of, oh, she took care in her appearance. She tried. She liked color. And then later on, when they're at the funeral, her friends and sisters see her toenails that are chipped and just think how she would have hated getting to the end of life and not being able to maintain her pristine toenails. And I just thought the difference of opinion on just a little observation was very interesting to me. Another thing that stuck out for me was how when they were going through her funeral preparations, the church sisters all got together and refused to let the funeral director dress her. They dressed her and got her ready and prepped for the funeral. So it kind of gave me, if you've ever read the book Smoke Gets in Your Eyes by Caitlin Doughty, she talks about people who experience death differently from different cultures, and how so many white people just want to stay very sterile away from dealing with death. We send our deceased off to the funeral to get all made up, and we don't engage in that experience. And I appreciated that they engaged in the experience in their culture. And it was interesting because Patrice, my friend who I read this with, is Black. And so she was saying that it was not a unique thing for her to notice that, because that's how her church growing up would have been too. And I just really appreciate it. It reminded me again of why we read together and why we discuss things together, because we all have different perspectives coming in and we all notice different things. So another plug for buddy reading with somebody. Other things that stuck out in here are the abuse. Again, this is not a light read. The abuse that her her daughters went through at the hand of family members and family members' spouses. The silence that Henrietta's husband had on some of the abuse made me sick to my stomach. So I just really recommend this book. I don't want to spoil too much, but yeah, it was very engaging. I did not want to put it down, even though I had to several times. And the last book that I want to talk to you about, I listened to an audio, and this one I think was recommended by Katie, Life Between Words. This is The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane by Kate DiCamillo, and this is read by Judith Ivey, who did a phenomenal job on audio. We went down to Kentucky for the eclipse and had a bit of a drive, obviously. My kids and I listened to this, and all of us, my 2-year-old even didn't like fuss about it, so that's good. But my boys, who are 9 and almost 7, ate this up. I mean, we just devoured it. I think it's about 3 hours long to listen to, so if you listen to the audio, it's not a big time commitment. But even if you read it out loud, it's just beautiful. Okay, I want to read my favorite quote from it because it's just perfect. You must be filled... I should tell you what it's about first. I'm sorry. I just got too excited. Edward Tulane is a China doll rabbit. And his journey is he's with a little girl. He's very well-dressed China rabbit. And this little girl loses him. I don't want to really give too much away, but loses him. And he goes through a series of ownership changes because of things that have happened. And he keeps having to leave these people. Obviously, he's a China rabbit, so he can't move on his own. Kind of reminded me a little bit of the Velveteen Rabbit. So if you like that one, pick up this one. He's very well dressed, takes great pride in who he is, but at the very beginning of the story, he just doesn't love people. He's more selfish, more self-concerned, and doesn't really understand what all the fuss is about this love thing. And as he goes through, he becomes more and more chipped, battered, loses his fancy clothes, changes his name. Obviously, the owners don't know his previous name, so they keep calling him different things, which really stuck out to me because the idea of a name was so important in this. Obviously, he starts off as Edward, and he becomes so many different things, including Jangles. The idea of somebody knowing who you really are, knowing your true name, and knowing, who you are inside, I think is what love is. And I don't want to give away the end, so I won't. But he's constantly wanting somebody to finally like love him and to know him and feel like he fits in. And he kind of figures out what love is on this journey that he goes on. Another thing that really stuck out to me was, at one point he's with a hobo, and all these hobo people keep whispering their loved ones' names in Edward's ear. And so he keeps kind of taking on that name that they don't want to forget, that power of that name. It just that was a little detail that really stuck in my head. I really recommend this book. This is my favorite quote in it, though. Okay. You must be filled with expectancy. You must be awash in hope. You must wonder who will love you. Whom will you love next? I'm done with being loved, Edward told her. I'm done loving. It's too painful. You disappoint me, she said. You disappoint me greatly. If you have no intention of loving or being loved, then the whole journey is pointless. You might as well leap off this shelf right now and let yourself shatter into a million pieces. Get it over with. I love the idea of sometimes where we get to that point where we're tired of loving, because it does hurt. It's not fun getting your heart broken or feeling disappointed. But that's what the whole journey is about. So I really just want to end with that one. I really recommend it. So that is a very long video. I'm very sorry, but I read some good books and I wanted to tell you about them. So I would love to hear in the comments if you've read any of these, what you think of them, if you're considering reading them, if you have questions, put them down below. I'll talk to you later. Bye.